Hi players, Nick Diatter here, Product Manager with Beyond Pulse. Today I'm going to walk you through how to access your player dashboard from your Beyond Pulse for Players app. As we know in the app, there's a couple tabs at the bottom. So we're at the Start tab right now where we can see the start screen. We have a Profile tab where we can test belt, check the belt for an update, edit your belt ID. There's the Leaderboard tab where we can check out the leaderboard and how we compare to others. There is a session overview tab. We can see the sessions we've been in. And then there's also a settings tab, a settings tab where you can. But what I really want to focus on today is how we access that dashboard. So you'll notice in the top right, there's two buttons. One being the question mark, which is just a tech support button. And to the left of that, there's a button which looks like a line graph. And if I actually click that button, it's going to navigate me to the player dashboard. So the first time you land here, you will need to log in. So I'm just going to log in quickly as I speak. But you can also access this from your laptop, your tablet, or any other device by visiting players.beyondpulse.com. And you'll enter that same login information. And the login information is the same login and password that you use for the app. So there's no need to create a new one. New account or try to or need to remember any other passwords. It's the same stuff. So when you land in the dashboard, you will be placed on what's called the dashboard page. The dashboard page gives you an overview basically of your last session. So for me, my last session was just testing the belt here in the house. So you can see I have 0 minutes with my heart rate elevated, which makes sense because I probably just started it, sat down, made sure it was working, and then turned it off. Gives you an overview of active participation if you click the arrow, and we can keep going through. We can get an overview of workload, and we can also get an overview of distance during that session. There is also the ability to look at it over the last 7 days. So it kind of creates an average over the last 7 days of all your training. You can look at it over the last 30 days, or you can look at it over a custom date range by clicking this filters button at the top. We also give you an overview of the last 10 days at the bottom, which just shows you kind of how much of each of these metrics. So for example, for distance, how many meters you accumulated each day to day in the previous 10 days of relative to today. That's not where you're going to spend the majority of your time though. The majority of your time will be spent probably on the calendar page. And what the calendar page will allow you to do, obviously this being September, I didn't create a session yesterday, but I'll just navigate randomly to June. The calendar page gives you an overview of all the sessions you ran during that month, on what day, and it gives you the length. So you can see on June 3rd, I ran a 42-minute individual session. On June 10th, I ran a 142-minute individual session. And I ran a couple team sessions for a couple different teams that I'm a part of on June 28th. So just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to actually click into this 142-minute session because I know there's some data here. So when I land here, the first thing I'm going to see is the heart rate metric. But again, the arrows here to the right and to the left of the dial actually allow us to flip between heart rate, active participation, workload, and distance, our four main metrics. So the first one, heart rate, we can see I spend 26 minutes above 80% of my max here. And the little question mark that appears here actually gives us a little bit of a scale. So in this case, my 26 minutes falls into that moderate zone of 15 to 30 minutes. So this is considered a moderate zone in terms of a moderate session in terms of heart rate. If we scroll down, we can see from the beginning of the session to the end of the session where my heart rate was relative to my max. So we have heart rate percentage on the y-axis, and then the duration of the session on the x-axis. So it goes basically from the time you start the app until the time you stop the app. You can see exactly where your heart rate is at every minute. We also get a table where we can overview kind of the entire session, so we can get an overview of what my top heart rate was, my average heart rate, and then the amount of time I spend in each one of these zones. So kind of a resting heart rate, a low heart rate, moderate heart rate, and a high heart rate, and a max heart rate. I'll just click through to active participation. So remember, active participation is the time we spend moving. So in this case, or in the case of active participation, kind of standing time or time that we're walking, we do not include as active participation. And then any jogging, running, obviously sprinting, those sorts of activities will be active participation. So for this activity or this session, I accumulated 69% active participation, which is, according to the scale, in the higher zone. So high being 60 to 80%. Sorry. If we scroll down, we also get a similar graph of where I was active throughout the session. And you can kind of see there's, I'll call it, two main chunks of data here. The first chunk kind of starts at 20 minutes and it goes till about, we'll say, 60 minutes. And then the second chunk goes from about 75 minutes until about 115 minutes. So those are actually, in this case of this session, and the reason why I chose this one is I actually played a game here. So that's my first half and my second half. And I'll show you how to do some cool things with that graph here in a moment. Again, if we scroll down, we do get an overview of active participation, how much of it was low, moderate, and vigorous physical activity, and then the total number of calories we burned, and then just an overview of the 10 days previous to this session. For workload, I accumulated 15 trims in this session, which is in the moderate section. This being a game, that's probably a little bit lower than you would expect for your own game. I'd probably expect most people to be 20 plus. To give some context here, I'm a holding midfielder, so I do a lot of kind of side-to-side movement on the field and really trying to kind of link the play from side to side and switch the field quite a bit. And in this particular game, we were on attack a lot, so I was kind of sitting there and just being a swingman and really swinging the ball from side to side and really trying to get the defense to open up and move. So I wasn't making a lot of penetrating runs. I wasn't making a lot of recovery runs. So I was doing a lot of stuff at very low speed, which is why my workload sits in that moderate zone. So workload is a combination of the amount of distance we run and then the speed we run it at. So again, I might have accumulated a lot of distance, which we'll see in a moment, but I probably did it at a very low speed. If we scroll down, we get an overview of what that speed looks like. Again, it's just meters per minute on the y-axis, duration on the x-axis. So you can clearly, again, see the two halves here that I played. We do also get the table, so we can see, you know, my workload, how much of it was accumulated at low, medium, high, and max intensity. And then the final metric we share is distance, where obviously I ran 10.2 kilometers, or 10,274 meters, which is quite a bit of distance for a game session. But again, I'm assuming because my workload is very low that I accumulated at a very low speed. So if we scroll down, this one we don't give you the line graph. We give you what I call a zone graph or horizontal bar graph. And it breaks that distance down based on speed zone. So what I actually like in this one is I can click this little toggle here and switch it to meters. And I can see exactly how many meters I ran at each speed. So I ran 5,578 meters at low speed, 4,444 meters at medium speed, and then 2 meters at high speed and 0 meters at max speed. So there is a red color here that indicates max speed, but I just didn't achieve it in this session. Again, we give you the 10-day overview at the bottom. But what I really want to dive into here is like how you can get more from this. So that's the basics of what you're going to find in our dashboard, and it gives you more information than just what you get kind of in your post-session email. But you can also come in here and you can create some segments, which actually allows you to compare a lot of really cool things. So I'm just going to use the active participation tab to do this, but you can actually do it from any of the dials that you have here. And I'm just going to scroll down so we can see the entire graph. So you'll remember that I mentioned that my half probably starts somewhere around 15 minutes, my first half that is, and it probably stops somewhere around 55 minutes where that active participation starts to come back down. So now I'm doing less running and I'm doing more walking. So it's somewhere between, again, we'll say about 15 minutes to about 55 minutes. So there's a 40-minute window. So what I can do, you'll notice at the top there's this create segment button. If I click that, I'm just going to change the segment name to first half. And then I'm just going to put in the start time and the end time of that segment that we said. So we said it was about 15 minutes to 55 minutes. And when we do that, we'll see that a first half segment is created here. So we can see where the active participation starts to rise and then where it starts to fall. I think I missed a little bit there at the end, but that's okay for this example. Second half, same thing. It starts at about 75 minutes or so, and it probably ends at around 1:15. So we can create that segment. So we'll call this one the second half, and we said it went from 75 minutes to 115 minutes. So that creates a second half segment. We can add additional segments. If I wanted to clip the little bit of a warm-up I did there at the beginning, we could clip that too. We can see my cool down at the end, probably after our coach's debrief. But this gives you an idea of where that movement occurred, and again, it allows you to kind of see the two different things side by side. So that provides a nice visual. But where it's also really helpful is then if I scroll down, the actual chart that we give you, or the table that we give you, actually breaks down each of your activities, so heart rate, or each of your metrics, heart rate, active participation, workload, distance. It breaks it down now by first half and second half. So I can see just how much active participation I did have in the first half versus how much active participation I had in the second half. Or if we go back to heart rate, for example, we can see how much I spent above 80% of my maximum heart rate in the first half versus how much did I spend there in the second half. So it gives us an idea of like which half was actually more difficult for me from a heart rate perspective. Where was I really pushing myself physically in that regard? And if we come to workload, same sort of idea. We can see how we've accumulated that workload. So in the first half, I accumulated 6 trims. In the second half, I accumulated 6 trims. So they were about the same physically, which makes sense because the graph tends to go up to roughly the same value here. It's not crazy different between the first half and second half. So we'd kind of expect, given that the lengths of these halves are the same, that the trims or the workload should be the same here. 6 trims in the first half, 6 trims in the second half, 12 total. Doesn't equal the full session because remember, I haven't clipped the warm-up or the cool down yet. So we can assume that I probably accumulated 3 trims in each of those, in both of those combined as well to make the full 15 trims. So again, where that becomes really cool is you can kind of dive into your session a little bit more and get a little bit more detail about, specific drills, or you can start to compare specific drills, and you can learn a lot about yourself. So for example, for me, what I've noticed is my warm-ups, and you can really see it here, is I never warm up to the intensity that I play at. So you can see for speed, or for the distance per minute here, I never really get as high as I achieve in a game. And if you look at my heart rate, I also don't ever really warm up to a point where I get my heart rate elevated to the point that I play at in a game, which probably leads to a generally a little bit slower start from me as a player because my body's not ready for that load or that what I'm about to do physically. So as a player, you can start to dive in and see like, okay, maybe I can do some more things here to do this, or maybe I can, jog in and jog out of water breaks to help increase my active participation, or maybe, a specific drill, you always notice that, you lack focus. So, does that show in your metrics? Now you can start to see by creating these segments exactly those. You can start to tease those sorts of things out. A couple other things I'll show you here. You can also view your session history from here. So this is similar to the app where you can view your session history. It gives you a little bit of an overview of each of those sessions. You can look at the individual sessions you've run, as you can see kind of here at the top now, versus the team sessions you run. And then this resources section, we're going to be adding a lot to this in the coming weeks, so it's really important, I think, to explain it in this video. But there's going to be a lot of resources here in this playbook section, where we're going to be telling you kind of how you can interpret your data. We can tell you a little bit of the links between some of the different metrics and how you can use them. This video that you're watching is going to be housed there as well. So it's going to be a source of a lot of information for you as a player, where a lot of it you can just clip in, watch it in a short video, and get an idea, a little bit more idea, or hopefully answer some questions you may have about your Beyond Pulse Smart Belt. But that's all I have for you today, guys. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at support@beyondpulse.com. We love when players reach out with questions about the data or how they can read the data. So we're always happy to help with those. But otherwise, hope you have continued success in the field, and good luck in your coming season.